Okay, welcome everyone. I hope that song was not too much of a jump scare when you joined us, but I think it really set the tone for what we're going to be talking about today, which is purpose and stakeholder governance. My name is Jamie. I'm on the community team at B Lab US and Canada, and I am very thrilled to be your host for today's call. We're going to start with some quick housekeeping before we begin. If you've been to an Impact Collab, you have seen these before. Closed captioning is available on this call, and you can control if and when it appears on your screen by clicking the CC button on the Zoom control bar on the bottom of your screen. The one switch up from our previous Impact Collabs, the standards content and breakout rooms will be recorded today, and we'll be sharing those recordings after the call with everyone. And then finally, please rename yourself with your name, your company, and the pronouns that you use if you'd like to include them. This will be really helpful for breakout rooms because there probably won't be time for introductions. And I want to acknowledge before we get into the content that we are all here in this virtual space together, but we're all calling in from the traditional territories of many Indigenous nations. And it's important to us at B Lab that we acknowledge and honor the ongoing stewardship of the land by Indigenous peoples that allow us to live and enjoy these places. And so I myself am calling in from the lands of the Ute, Cheyenne, and Arapaho nations, colonially known as Denver, Colorado. It is a beautiful day here today, but I'm very thrilled to be online with all of you. We encourage you to share in the chat what territory you're joining from. And there will be a link if you're not able to, if you don't know, to find out which land you reside on. And today's event is part of a larger Impact Collab series that covers each impact topic, one per month. And today we are in the 7th topic in the series, almost the last one, on purpose and stakeholder governance. You can register for the final Impact Collab on the foundation requirements on November 20th. We hope that you can join us for that final Impact Collab. But I am so excited to jump into all of the things that we have to share with you today. So, I'm mostly excited because of all the amazing folks that we have on this call to share their expertise and knowledge with you. And it will start with Brigitte from B Lab Global, who will give us an introduction to the purpose and stakeholder governance topic. We are also lucky to be joined by Issy Corby from the Purpose Trust Ownership Network and Rob Sinclair from Conscious Brands, who'll be sharing their expertise on ownership models, stakeholder governance, and stakeholder mapping. And then we will talk about some resources and calls to action to continue digging into this work. We'll answer some questions that were pre-submitted and some that were answered live. And then we will end in breakout rooms where you'll have the opportunity to get started on the foundational and really essential practices outlined in the PSG topic, like double materiality, stakeholder mapping, purpose statements, and responsible marketing policies. And we have some expert people on the call to help lead you through those exercises. So you're definitely not going to want to miss those pieces. The Q&A will be open throughout this call, so please be sure to submit your questions there. You can also upvote questions that you wish to be voiced over live, and we will pick the most upvoted to answer. Unfortunately, we will not be able to answer specific questions about your company's context here today, so for any questions of that nature, we will redirect you to community@bcorporation.net, and Kirsten and I can help you find the answers that you need. Next slide, please. And as you may already know, the new standards are heavily tailored to company size. So it's really important for all of you on this call to have an understanding of what size category your B Corp falls into. Remember that size is determined by the number of full-time employees or revenue, whichever one is higher. So you can use that link in the chat to find out which size you are, but keep this in mind as Brigitte is going through all of the standard topics. And now I will pass to you, Brigitte. Take it away.
Thanks a lot, Jamie. Good morning, everyone. I'm very happy to be here with you today. So let's jump into the topic. Maybe first, why do we have this impact topic? Purpose and stakeholder governance. As you may know, B Corps, where jurisdictions allow, are legally required to change their governance structure to consider all their stakeholders in decision-making. So this is the B Corp legal requirement. So this is just a reminder of that. And as such, the purpose and stakeholder governance impact topic intends to ensure that each company is acting on the letter and spirit of that legal change, whether it's available or not. So this is about, just to make simplified, the operationalization of stakeholder governance. Okay, so let's have a look at the 6 requirements in this topic. First of all, it asks companies to have a public purpose statement to create a positive social or environmental impact and embed this in their strategy. This is followed by stakeholder governance practices, especially under PSG2 and PSG3, the grievance mechanism. And the oversight and accountability of that purpose and the company's social and environmental impact is detailed under PSG5. Then PSG4 and PSG6 are about the responsible and transparent communication of the company's impact. So let's dive into PSG1. The company establishes a public purpose to make a meaningful positive impact. So what the requirement asks is that the company's purpose statement sets out the specific impact the company intends to make on society, the environment, or both. It has business relevance and is integrated into the company's strategy. It is publicly available for all stakeholders to be able to see it, and it's approved by the highest governing body. Now, let's take a look at how the PSG1 requirement interacts with the legal requirement. The B Corp legal requirement asks companies to adopt stakeholder governance specifically and the broad purpose to create a material positive impact on society and the environment. So this legal requirement is broad and encompassing because its primary aim is to protect the company's purpose from being challenged by shareholders who might prioritize profits over purpose. So it provides a legal shield, ensuring that the company's leadership has the right to consider all stakeholders, workers, community, customers, the environment as well, in their decision-making and not just shareholders. It basically lays the foundation for the 7 impact topics. Now, if we take a look at PSG1, it deals with the company's public-facing purpose. So not the one that's embedded in the company's articles of association in legal form, but the public-facing purpose. And the intent here is to allow companies to publicly communicate a clear and business-relevant purpose that clarifies how their existence generates specific social or environmental value. And this may be influenced by their sector or context or business model. But while the public purpose can be targeted, the implementation is constrained and enforced by 2 elements. So one is the mandatory legal requirement, which requires the consideration of all stakeholders. And the other is the rigorous demands of the 7 impact topics. So this structure ensures that even if a company spotlights one area publicly, it cannot ignore its fundamental social and environmental responsibilities across all stakeholders. Now let's take a look at PSG2. The company considers its impacts on stakeholders in decision-making. It has 5 sub-requirements, but overall the PSG2 requirement is about implementing stakeholder governance practices. PSG 2.1 asks smaller companies to have a mechanism to consider or involve stakeholders in decision-making. I will get back to that a bit later. Now, this stakeholder consideration should be embedded in a more formalized policy for larger companies under PSG 2.2. Larger companies are also required to conduct regular materiality assessments with the involvement of their stakeholders. And if there are any material issues that are not covered by the B Lab standards, like, for instance, data privacy or nutrition, the company needs to set targets for those material issues under PSG 2.4. And for the largest companies, the requirement also asks that they consider stakeholders when making decisions about dividends and stock buybacks. Now, let's zoom in on PSG 2.1. So this is for smaller companies, and it asks first that the company identifies its stakeholders, it maps them. Companies need to consider their stakeholders in decision-making. So how does that what does that mean? It means that they need to create ways to gather input from these different stakeholder groups. And the mechanism may depend on the company's context, the stakeholder groups, and other factors. For instance, the company may use surveys with its suppliers or customers, or it can also establish stakeholder or expert advisory groups. It can have regular consultations or focus groups with communities or have a workers' council, just to name a few examples. Key is to ensure a broad representation. That means that the company specifically needs to cover workers, suppliers, customers, local communities, and the environment with one mechanism fitting to that stakeholder group. Now let's move to PSG3. The company has adequate procedure to address stakeholder grievances. There are also tailored requirements depending on the size of the company. But maybe let's discuss first what a grievance is. It's a concern or complaint about the company's social, environmental, or governance issues that a stakeholder raises to the company. So in simpler terms, if someone who cares about the company feels that the company maybe is not acting in an appropriate way, they are worried about how the company treats people, the planet, or how the company is run. So PSG 3.1 and 3.2 are for smaller companies, while PSG 3.3 and 3.4 are for larger companies. These requirements ask companies to have a public grievance procedure, like a grievance form, to track grievances and also to assign accountability for resolving these grievances. And there are additional transparency and accountability requirements for larger companies. Let's move on to PSG4, which is about responsible marketing and public relations. PSG 4.1 asks the company that it has principles for responsible marketing and public relations. This needs to be a dedicated policy for larger companies. So for medium and larger size of companies, a dedicated policy and also oversight by the highest governing body is needed. But maybe let's look at what PSG 4.1 could mean in practice, because it says that the company should have principles to ensure that claims are verifiable, truthful, and follow ethical guidance. So this could mean that, for instance, the company ensures that the claims are backed up by facts and data, especially if it's about environmental claims. The company also should not make vague or exaggerated or misleading claims that could trick consumers into thinking that the company is more responsible than it is. And the company could also consider the broader effects of its marketing. For example, it may avoid messages that promote overconsumption, or it identifies and reduces the risks that marketing and public relation practices may pose to some sensitive stakeholder groups like children or teenagers. Let's zoom into PSG 5. It's about oversight. The company's social and environmental impact and stakeholder considerations should be monitored by the highest governing body. There are different requirements for year 0 and for year 3 and on. This is also in a way to help companies with the continuous improvement. Now, if we are zooming in on year 0, so this is really about the foundations of oversight and accountability. PSG 5.1 asks that the highest governing body has oversight of the implementation of the company's purpose, its social and environmental performance, and stakeholder governance. For instance, that the grievance procedure reports are shared with the highest governing body, and relevant information from stakeholders through the various mechanisms reach the highest governing body. And these responsibilities should be embedded in the highest governing body's terms of reference for larger companies. So for instance, larger companies may have a board, and the board charter may list these responsibilities. Now if we are moving on to the year 3, sub-requirements. Here, these are mostly for larger companies, and it's to enhance further the accountability. It's asked that there needs to be an annual performance targets for the executive team linked to the social or environmental performance, but also that the members of the executive team, if there is an incentive system, like a bonus system, it needs to be tied to social and environmental performance targets. And PSG 5.5 for the largest companies asks that the managers need to have at least one performance review tied to the company's social or environmental performance. So this is to help trickle down the impact across the organization, so that each function understands and knows how it can contribute to the company's social and environmental goals. Then moving on to PSG 6, that's about transparency. And it kicks in year 3. So here we have 3 sub-requirements. And it's PSG 6.1 and 6.2 are about publishing an impact report. But for the largest companies, we ask that this impact report should also be aligned with a third-party standard like GRI. And PSG 6.3, again, for larger companies, it asks that the company evaluates workers' understanding, readiness, and perception of their impact strategy. Why? Because feedback from workers can be very relevant to understand the effectiveness of the strategy, and it can also support the culture change needed to really implement the company's purpose. It asks a critical internal question: do employees actually understand and feel equipped to carry out the company's impact strategy? Okay, so that was a brief overview of the PSG impact topic, and I hand it back to my colleagues.
Thank you so much, Brigitte, for your overview of that topic. Your expertise and perspective are so valuable on these calls, and we really appreciate you being here. As Brigitte outlined, the requirements in this impact topic really help B Corps align the foundation of their business with their values and center the folks most important to your work, which are customers and your communities and your workers. And now I have the pleasure of introducing Issy Corby from Purpose Trust Ownership Network, who will share how Purpose Trust can be a vehicle to really operationalize these requirements through ownership structures that benefit those very people. So Issy, take it away.
Hey, thanks, Jamie. Hi, everyone. I'm calling in from Portland, Oregon today. I think I saw there's a few of us in the chat. I'm the program manager for the Purpose Trust Ownership Network, and we are a newer nonprofit organization dedicated to support the growth of Purpose Trust ownership in the United States. So to break this down, Purpose Trust ownership places ownership of a business in a special kind of trust called a non-charitable purpose trust that holds company interests to benefit a purpose rather than a person. And a simple way to think about this is that the purpose trust dictates how profits will be utilized. So typically, owners or shareholders benefit from the financial gain of the company. But since the trust is not a legal instrument, that usually means that the profits are reinvested in the company, distributed to employees through a profit sharing program, or donated, or some combination. And if you give me one more click, there's a couple of things that illustrate this. Thank you. So it looks a little like this. And additionally, since the trust is replacing a role that's usually held by individuals, it is self-governed instead by stakeholders of the purpose who have a fiduciary duty to uphold it. And I'll explain this governance a little more in a minute. Finally, purpose trusts can also operate in perpetuity, making them a really attractive strategy for business owners who have built their business to be a force for good and want to ensure that it continues to operate that way by maintaining its independence. So one note on nomenclature, I try to stick to this blanket term purpose trust to describe these models, but there are a handful of popular names you may be familiar with that more specifically attempt to group purpose trusts that have similar aims. So there are perpetual purpose trusts, or PPTs, and employee ownership trusts, or EOTs, are two of the most popular, but stewardship trusts and mixed income neighborhood trusts are also gaining some traction. So given that purpose trusts have, one, a defined purpose, and two, can allow for stakeholder governance, they present an opportunity for the ownership of a business to align with this new PSG standard. However, ownership under a purpose trust is incredibly flexible and not only can be, but is customized for every business. The fundamental baseline that all trust-owned companies share is simply that a trust, rather than a shareholder, holds the business interests. But from there, what actually goes into the purpose, what stakeholders are recognized and prioritized, how profits are reinvested, distributed, and donated, and even whether the trust owns part or all of the company is all customizable. And so we got together a group of trust-owned businesses that are certified B Corps and/or public benefit corporations that are familiar with the B Corp certification standards to dig into these new requirements and define how purpose trust ownership structures align and can be leveraged by companies who want to embed impact at this ownership level. All right, so let's dive into what this looks like. So first, related to the sub-requirement PSG1, every trust has a defined purpose statement in its trust agreement. And this provides an opportunity for social and environmental impact to be embedded at that ownership level in that trust purpose. One thing to keep in mind is that trust companies can still have a separate company mission statement, and this may or may not be designed to match that purpose statement in the trust agreement itself. I think about half of the companies in our group said that theirs are the same, and the other half said that they had different statements in each of these places. And just to give like an example of what that can look like when they're different, one company that stood out is an employee ownership trust, an EOT, where their trust purpose statement was really simple and focused on being a form of employee ownership. Effectively, it said that the company operates to benefit its employees. And so the company mission statement is where they continue to center the positive impact that they strive to have on their customers and community. Beyond the trust agreement, there are three primary governance roles that commonly include stakeholder representation in governance, which relates to that PSG2. So first is the executive leadership, and this may or may not have existed for a company before it converted to purpose trust ownership. You know, this is your good old board of directors that operates the day-to-day operations and decision-making for the company. But I highlight it here because for many smaller companies and sole proprietorships, it doesn't previously exist. And so it's something that's designed and implemented as part of a company's conversion to purpose trust ownership. And in that design process, it presents an opportunity for businesses to designate seats for stakeholders at that executive management level of the company. The second role is the trust enforcer. Now, this role doesn't present as much of an opportunity for stakeholder involvement, but it is essential to the legal management of the trust. The trust enforcer is an independent arbitrator who investigates and addresses grievances from stakeholders. So you really want someone who can understand the legalese and make unbiased decisions in this role. It's typically fairly uninvolved and just comes into play as kind of a check and balance when major concerns are raised by stakeholders about how the trust's purpose is being upheld or not being upheld by the company's board and the trust stewardship committee. And finally, last but certainly not least, we have the Trust Stewardship Committee, or the TSC. And the TSC is responsible for governing the assets held by the trust. They are the ones with fiduciary duty to uphold its purpose. And this is really a primary opportunity for stakeholder involvement. The TSC is engaged on a regular basis, something like quarterly or annually, to review the results to purpose, which is essentially an impact report that breaks down and measures a company's performance as it relates to that trust purpose. So all purpose trust companies require the highest level of governing bodies, be that the TSC or the board of directors, kind of depending on the decision or the issue. And they both are involved in monitoring these results to purpose. Often This report is prepared by the board and reviewed by the TSC, and then the TSC would report back and provide high-level direction as needed depending on their assessment. And this reporting process could tie back into PSG 5 around monitoring social and environmental impact, particularly if those impact aims are included in the trust purpose, as well as potentially PSG 6 if companies streamline this reporting and publish these reports publicly. Alrighty, so I could go on all day, but to end, I wanted to share several resources that you can access to learn more about Purpose Trust ownership and explore it as a potential strategy for your company. So first is the guidance from our work group. The group just wrapped up our conversations like last week. So we're working on writing all of that up into a resource that will be made available soon. Secondly, Piton recently launched a knowledge hub for Purpose Trust ownership. And the knowledge hub has these three primary parts: a directory of trust-owned businesses, as well as service providers that have experience with Purpose Trust conversions, a library of resources that centralizes news articles and explainers and videos and podcasts about Purpose Trusts, and an events calendar where you can find other webinars, peer groups, and conferences around alternative ownership. And I pulled this chart off of our Knowledge Hub. It shows the businesses we currently have on our list that are owned by Purpose Trust. There's about 68, I think, right now, by their size. And as you can see, the majority are actually small and medium-sized businesses. I think, in fact, just over 50% of the companies we know about have 50 or fewer employees. And so I wanted to point this out because I know Patagonia tends to be the most popular example of Purpose Trust ownership, and I don't want that example to be intimidating or put anyone off. Businesses of all sizes and from a wide variety of industries have implemented this model. And then as for upcoming events, we are hosting a conference which will bring together trust-owned companies and the professionals that support them next February in Austin, Texas. And finally, B Lab has another webinar in 2 weeks that we will be part of called Empowered to Own, Driving Impact Through Purpose-Driven Ownership Models, to talk more about Purpose Trust ownership and how it fits among kind of a broader toolbox of different forms of alternative ownership. And of course, you're very welcome to reach out to me as well. My email's here, and this QR code will take you to our main website. Thank you all so much.
Yay, thank you, Izzy. That was amazing. I loved learning about Purpose Trust, so thank you so much for sharing that with us. There are some great questions in the Q&A that you can check out to help folks continue learning, and then we'll also share all of those resources that Izzy mentioned in the follow-up email. So thank you so much again. And now we are going to hear from a longtime B Corp community member, Rob Sinclair from Conscious Brands. Conscious Brands is one of our founding B Corps in Canada. And with that deep institutional knowledge, Rob is going to walk us through how to map stakeholders with intention and authenticity rooted in a living systems approach. So thank you so much, Rob, for being here. Off to you. I think you might be muted.
We will unmute and start again. Rewind the clock 10 seconds. I'm calling in from Treaty 7, Mokinska, which is also known as Calgary, Alberta, Canada. So welcome, everyone. Take a deep breath. I invite you not just to think about stakeholder engagement today, but to feel into it. Imagine a spiral instead of a spreadsheet, a mycelium field instead of a map. We're here to compost and reweave our language of this work. Relational fields are living reciprocal systems of co-creation, consequence, and care. And can we go to the next slide? Yeah, actually the next one. There we go. So this is actually my favorite impact topic area, and I love it for so many reasons. Mostly because it has an opportunity to address so many of the other impact topic areas. So a lot of the work that we've been doing recently, and I'm sure a lot of you have when looking at the new standard and going through the assessment, you've been able to kind of look at that in conjunction with your current B impact assessment. So we layer that over for clients and do something called nodal points of intervention. And these are, think of it as acupuncture points in the system that have the most impact, the most potential. And more than not, we're finding these yellow circles emerge, which are these nodal points, which are materiality and stakeholder engagement, and how they interact with so many other pieces. Next slide, please. So just to kind of set the context, I want to give a couple definitions, and I want to frame the conversation around these terms. So conscious, the word conscious from Conscious Brands really means to know together and to know with. Next. So when we say conscious brands, we're not claiming enlightenment. We're inviting you to return to the root, to co-sense, to co-witness, and to hold together that knowing. And we're not trying to discover insights. What we're trying to do is discover that entangled awareness and do that together. The next one. This one, the etymology of the word stakeholder. I just want to name this as well, because literally the etymology of it is to hold someone to money, property, and claims. So we go to the next slide. Let's pause on that word stakeholder, because it has those logistical roots. Someone holding a stake in a contested property. This is not a neutral word. It encodes extraction, enclosure, and a settler worldview. And if we keep using it, it must metabolize its lineage. And I think B Lab has done a great job, along with a lot of other organizations, in really holding this word and metabolizing that lineage and bringing it back up. Next one. So when we think of a regenerative framing around this language of stakeholder, we at Conscious Brands use the term relational fields. So what is the system asking us in order to compost harm and steward emergence? So we've been doing this work, as Jamie kind of alluded towards. We're a founding Canadian B Corp. We've been doing this work since 2007, and we've been iterating as we go. A lot of our initial work has been based on large group participatory dialogue, and some of the OG B Corps will remember us in the Champions Retreat 2012, 13, and 14, holding large group conversations. And we've been doing this through these participatory processes, we've been approaching stakeholder engagement. And if we truly are living into our higher purpose of advancing harmony through business, we need to work with that tool that supports the whole. So about 7 years ago, we started exploring stakeholder engagement through the lens of living systems and came to this place of relational governance, generative listening, and co-sensing into the fields. This is our approach and our journey. And I know some of you who are just starting this journey might have a different approach. And this is just how we've been advancing it. Next slide. So basically, we come to this work with a 4-step process where we establish that field and map that work internally, working with B teams, working with different groups internally. And then we go outside and start testing some of that with actually conversations and some surveys with the stakeholders. Then we come back and do a materiality assessment and then start translating that into the different hotspots and commitments to governance. So this first step, and in the corner there, you can see how it relates to the standard. But the keys here are really, the maps are mirrors to what's happening. And when we start looking at different areas of the map, those relational fields, those stakeholders, we start to see changes as we start mapping them out. So the field's alive, and we want to sense what's emerging in the space. Next one. So we start with the customer. This is based on some of the work with Carol Sanford in the Pentad. So the customer is kind of foundational, right? And then we look at the co-creators. Those are employees, some of the supply chain. The earth is a stakeholder, community, and investors. And as we kind of look at our organization through these 5 different perspectives, we're starting to see different areas where we potentially can have impact. And, when we take a regenerative a lens on this as well, we start to see, like what is being offered, what this work does through and to the lives of our stakeholders, to our customers, how the planet's involved. And these maps really do become mirrors. And so we're kind of growing that capacity internally and starting to embed a deeper purpose into the DNA of our organization, because these maps, this active mapping changes what we see. Next. Yeah, so we're moving past that place of like who has a stake in this project and how we manage them, to what are the fields of entanglement that already are active here, and how might they attuned to them. Next one. So this one, this is where we start to go out and hear a voice outside of the organization and started looking at that interconnectedness. Key here is really, this is what Theory U, if anyone's been using Theory U, would call the social fields quality of presence. And so now that we have this information both internally and externally, we go to the next slide, we can start mapping it and start to look at an initial dashboard of how this impacts or the different impact topic areas within the B impact assessment from the different perspectives. But that's only a starting place. If we go to the next slide, what we start to do is we look at materiality. So our approach to materiality is kind of something we call reverse materiality. So as opposed to looking at our material issues from the unsustainable present, we look at it from the regenerative future. So really, we're sensing into what does the future require of us and how can we become worthy of it as an organization. If we go to the next slide, these are the 8 areas that we look at from materiality, and there's 23 break-even goals from that are comprised of this. Next slide. And we kind of vet this from, how difficult will it be for our business to reach this goal? And how much could society be impacted if the goal is not reached? And how much risk could the business be exposed to if this goal is not pursued? And these are kind of the filters in which we look at these 23 break-even goals, which now we have a lens of some material issues. If we go to the next slide, what this does is it actually acts as an early detection system for grievances. So I know, the sub-requirements 3.1 and 3.3 are kind of some interesting ways to start looking at this. And this is an early detection system. So we can treat this feedback as a signal, not as noise. We start to strengthen that field, and grievances become compost for that evolution. So this now all comes together. If we go to the next slide, this all comes together into this like meta dashboard that we have, where we start to look at these relational fields from the 5 different perspectives. We have the 23 break-even goals from materiality. So we prioritize that, and we start to see where these hotspots are and where we can start shifting as relates to the B impact assessment, as well as making our business a force for good. If we go to the next slide, we suggest doing this on a semi-annual basis. I know, it starts to become the culture of the organization. We start to review this as we set goals and priorities around it. Next slide. So, when we're talking about conscious brands, we're really inviting a return to co-sensing, co-witnessing, and knowing together, and discovering what entangled awareness is with all our stakeholders. And it's an opportunity for our internal culture to really breathe out and breathe in and be part of the whole ecosystem. So with all that, that was a lot in 10 minutes. I have 9 seconds left. I'll be hosting a breakout group if you are wondering more about this. And if you want to do a deeper dive, we have a workshop on November 19th, and where we start to reimagine all these things that we just talked about. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rob. You crushed the timing. Amazing work. Excited for folks to continue the conversation in Breakout Room. So thank you all so much, Issy, Brigitte, Rob, for your expertise. We've heard this again and again in this call, that this top impact topic is so foundational. And I think it really speaks to what I have heard B Corp say, and again and again, what drew them to this movement, which is wanting to do business differently, to have a purpose, to show up authentically, and to treat people that we impact with respect and dignity. And this PSG impact topic really allows folks to kind of pave the way and operationalize that. So thank you again, Brigitte, Issy, and Rob, for giving color to this requirement that is so foundational, really to the heart of the B Corp movement. And so I know we've been talking a lot. So what can you do next? Firstly, most importantly, you can stay for these amazing breakout rooms that we're going to have, because it'll really allow you to dig into the content and learn more about how to really operationalize and start working on some of these really important sub-requirements. Next, you can join the PSG group on the Beehive, where I'll share resources that we've covered today and any questions that we weren't able to answer during the call. Then you can take the Purpose and Stakeholder Governance Immersion course. This is an online, self-paced, free course to help you learn more about the impact topic itself. And you can continue learning on that November 6th Empowered to Own event. You can join Rob's event on November 19th, I think it was. And we'll link them all, obviously, in the follow-up email for you to dig into. And on that note, you can review all the additional resources that we will send out after this call in the email, including the impact topic and practice guide. And next, you can join us on November 20th to join the final Impact Collab on foundational requirements. This one will be closing out the series that we've worked so hard on at B-Lab US and Canada. So really hope you can join that last one. And you can join on the Beehive or the link in the chat. And now we're going to begin the question and answer portion of this call. We will answer some pre-submitted questions, and then if we have time, we will cover some of the most upvoted questions from the Q&A feature. So now if you want to go in and upvote some of those to VoiceOver Live, I think we'll have enough time to do that. I'll pass to Zach.
Perfect. Thank you, Jamie. If we can go to the next slide, we had two pre-submitted questions. So the first one was, does having a social or environmental purpose statement mean that a company has a social or environmental business model? And how should it be handled if a company has a wide range of purposes or impacts? And I'll pass it over to Brigitte to answer that question.
Thanks, Zach, and thanks for the question. In short, no, it does not mean that. The intent is that the company's public purpose aligns with the B Corp legal requirements intent. So to reiterate, this public purpose statement helps communicate the ways the company uses its business operations and strategies to create a positive impact. So it helps communicate that transparently to the public. So it should be aspirational, but also possible for the company to act on it. Over time, as the company is moving closer towards its purpose, there could be a shift in business model. But first, this purpose sets the goal, and that's why it's important that it's embedded in the strategy and there is oversight by the highest governing body.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Brigitte. And the second question that was submitted was, does the company need to cover each tier of suppliers and co-manufacturers with a mechanism for stakeholder consideration? And this question is related to PSG requirement 2. And I'll pass it over once again to Brigitte.
Thanks for this question as well. So indeed, PSG 2.1 and PSG 2.2 are talking about the stakeholder consideration. So it is key that the company covers each stakeholder group as listed in the compliance criteria. So like workers, suppliers, customers, investors, community as well, and of course the environment. But in this case, specifically about suppliers, it must cover suppliers as a group, but there is some flexibility here. The compliance criteria asks that the company identifies and prioritizes its stakeholders. This will help them to define the mechanism, as even within one stakeholder group, there may be differences. Like the company may have direct engagement, surveys, and regular consultations with a prioritized stakeholder within a stakeholder group, like for instance, with tier 1 or co-manufacturers. While the company may rely on indirect engagement with other stakeholders like experts or NGOs, or maybe the grievance mechanism to get input from, in this case, other tiers of suppliers. So it really depends on the company's context and where the company feels that there should be some prioritization. But what's important that the company has a way to gather input for decisions that may affect the different stakeholder groups. So I hope that answers this question.
Perfect. Thank you. And now I believe we have some time for live Q&A. So if you have any questions that you are interested in discussing live, please post them in the Q&A function and upvote whatever questions you may have. And we might be able to answer some questions live right now. Otherwise, maybe Jamie, if there's no other questions that people have, we could also move to the breakout rooms. But happy to do whatever seems best.
Yeah, sounds great. I think Kelly Brady's question from Chomps has a couple of votes. If Carson, if you wanted to voice that one over live for folks. Sorry.
I was responding to another one in the chat. Will you tell me which one that was again?
Yes. The question was, can a purpose statement be achieved through a company mission statement, or do they need to be separate statements?
Yeah, question. So a purpose statement is generally different from a mission statement. A mission statement outlines what the company does and who they do it for, while a purpose statement explains more explicitly why the company exists. It's often tied to like company legacy or sort of like the backstory of the company. So a mission statement could potentially serve as a purpose statement if it's also conveying the company's reason for being. And all of that's outlined in the standards PDF too, so you can dive deeper there.
Beautiful. Thank you. I see another live question. Could you share more on becoming a public benefit corporation?
I'm happy to take that one live. What I'll say is that it does vary state to state, and it's available in some states and not others. But what I would recommend doing is going to B Lab's legal requirement tool, which is available. I imagine if you just, I'll leave a link for you to access it, but also if you type in B Lab legal requirement, it probably will be the first item that pops up. But there will be resources available on the legal requirement tool that tell you exactly what your company's legal requirement is, and then also provide resources on how you can meet that legal requirement. So definitely a good resource to use if your company either has not met the legal requirement yet or is looking to meet it in the future.
Beautiful. Okay. We will move on to breakout rooms because I think they have really amazing content that y'all will want to dig into. And any of the questions that we didn't get a chance to answer today will be shared after the call. So keep plugging away at those if you have more questions. So we have some amazingly brilliant people here that hopefully some of you, if not most of you, know, to share their learning, their expertise, and help you dig into the actual practices we talked about here today in breakout rooms. So we are joined by Kristy O'Leary from Decade Impact, Nat Korol from Hyphen, Rob Sinclair from Conscious Brands, and Jennifer Harrity from Sensiba. And the breakout rooms that we will be having today are the Poetry of Purpose. And this one, Kristy will help folks craft their purpose statement in a short workshop. Obviously, Kristy has so much experience and expertise in the B Corp community. So this is a great room to join if you're looking into how to craft your purpose statement. Jennifer will lead an introduction to double materiality. Jennifer is amazing and has been at Sensiba helping B Corps do this work for many years. So this is a great opportunity to learn from one of our wonderful, amazingly brilliant community members. And then if you were interested to continue the conversation with Rob to dig into all of his expertise and knowledge, this is a great place to continue that conversation in his I Wonder breakout room. And finally, Nat Korol is from Hyphen, which is a brand new B Corp certified, I think, in the last couple of months in Canada. And Nat will be sharing her experience drafting their responsible marketing policy in their company. So like I said, these breakout rooms will be recorded because they're really digging into the content of the standards, and we want you to be able to hear from all of our experts on the call today. But these are some great options for everyone on this call. Hope you can join them. And now we'll have them begin.